This research, my research for this interview, actually earned you one more fan. Because I'm a big fan of Laurie Anderson. And when I heard the same tonalities and music and approach to composition, I thought that, okay, well, that's good that someone picks up and goes on with the same idea of how to create and how to speak almost meditatively to groovy tunes. So this is what I really appreciate about music and about your style now, because you've earned another fan.
Oh.
Yes, in your army of fans, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think that was like the first time I saw any of Laurie Anderson's work when a journalist did a review of my first EP and compared me to Laurie Anderson. So that's actually how I learned about her. But yeah, she's a really fascinating artist. It's really inspiring to see other artists who are very much like exploring different realms, but from like a musical standpoint, or seeing, I guess, music artists who kind of like go into many different fields beyond music. So yeah, it's she's a really great artist.
Yes, but you're a great deal different from the style as well, because you have synesthesia. And well, the first question here is what types of synesthesia do you have, and which of these types do you enjoy most?
I guess my most cathartic or the most dynamic synesthesia is sound to taste and taste to sound, and they work both ways. It's usually really high frequencies that trigger flavors of lemon, lime, grapefruit, but maybe lemon is the most prominent to really high frequencies. And low frequencies like peanut butter and dark chocolate and tea are triggered when I hear really, really low frequencies. And the textures of frequencies and flavors also change. So like crunchy peanut butter sounds like crunchy base to me.
Oh, great, great. It sounds delicious. Does it feel identically, physically identical to real food and real mouthfeel experience, or is it something a bit different? How does it feel physically?
Um, I guess I don't know, because it's like I can't compare my experience with flavors and sounds to other people, but to me it makes sense. Like when I hear high frequencies and lemon, the flavors of like lemon being triggered. Um, yeah, I don't know. In my mind and my physical reaction, it makes sense to me. It doesn't feel odd or strange. Um, and I guess with the visual side, the way that the steps of the way my synesthesia works is usually visuals to flavors and then to sounds. So it kind of goes down this like chain reaction of events. And some frequencies of colors are, as well as sounds and flavors, are way more muted, or they're a lot softer, so they're more in the background and they're not as upfront. So oftentimes people ask if I just like experience life all the time tasting like crazy flavors, um wherever I go, and it's actually not the case. It's just some, I think it's mainly the really high frequencies and the really low frequencies that get triggered the most. Everything in between is on a spectrum. And they're like very, very subtle. So unless I'm like really paying attention to the mid frequencies, then sometimes it's more like associative and it's like a little bit more in the background. And I guess like if there isn't a lot going on and I have no other distractions, then I can tune into it a lot better. Um, but I think because I just have a hypersensitivity to frequencies of different kinds of like, especially sounds, my sound to taste synesthesia being overreactive can just feel like really overwhelming sometimes. So rather than it being a type of synesthesia that I prefer than others, it's more of the amount of frequency information that happens. If it's too much, then it gets a little bit overwhelming. So yeah, I heard about these like special earplugs that you can wear, that you can just like use every day in normal scenarios, not just like going to nightclubs, that I am considering and getting. Because I do get exhausted if I have like too much sonic information happening.
And how was it for you when you first discovered that you have synesthesia? I guess it was somewhere in childhood or in your teens. What was it like? I mean, what was the discovery like? I mean, you bumped into it and what?
Um, I guess something that I just assumed other people had, but I didn't know it was an anomaly or anything like that. It was more, I think, in 2000, I can't remember the exact year. 2000, I don't know, maybe 13, 2012. I keep forgetting the timeline, but it was in the 2000s when I met Adam John Williams, who's also a musician and a synesthete, and he did an interview about his synesthesia, and we met in person, and I asked him about his synesthesia, and that's when I first learned about it. And I didn't realize up until that point that it was this thing that happens to people, and everyone's form of synesthesia is very strange and peculiar and unique. So that's when I actually started to talk about it more openly. And I guess because like taste and sound are very internalized senses. It's not like, you know, seeing the color red and talking about the color red, where you can kind of like share that experience with someone else, and you can both be looking at the color red and talk about it. I guess because yeah, flavors and sounds don't really have like a visual cue other than like, you know, a plate of food, but like that specific combination of like flavors and sounds being triggered, they've just been kind of internalized up until that point when it became a subject to talk about. And so I guess I then fell into this community of other synesthetes, and it's been fascinating to learn how other synesthetes experience and perceive life. I think the only other person I've met who has this sound to taste synesthesia is LJ Rich, who you may know of as well. And so we did a fun collaboration years ago where we performed in front of an audience and fed them different flavored popcorn. And yeah, she has a very, very intricate sound to taste relationship, even more than me, because she's got perfect pitch. So yeah, I just remember her saying she loves the flavor of onions, but she can't eat onions and the juice of an onion when she like cooks it, because they're in two different keys.
And anyone in your family or in your kin has synesthesia? Do you know about it, or are you kind of a specific example of this phenomenon?
I don't know anyone in the family who has it. And if they do, then they haven't talked about it. So yeah, I've talked about it with my immediate family, and I don't know if they fully get it, but it could also be a language barrier thing. But yeah, so far from what I know, no one in my family that I know of has it. Maybe distant relatives have it. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. And you take a look at, well, if you take a Cajun approach to music, you know that music and sound and noise and any type of bodily activity sometimes have no boundaries. So you know that music and noise is a very blurred, blurredly distinguished. Do you have synesthesia only to music sounds, or are there any situations maybe that noise in overall, everyday sounds also can produce and trigger synesthesia in you?
Yeah, I think the most unpleasant one is the sound of metal against metal. So if I walk across a construction site or I visit the dentist and I hear like drilling, and it sounds like it's drilling against metal, or either maybe it's also just the sound of metal going through other materials. It causes a metallic flavor, and I have a very like mouth saliva reaction to those frequencies, where like my whole mouth will just salivate and like feel and taste metal, and it's not pleasant. So those are moments when um it's the most unpleasant synesthetic experience, and I have to like usually just cover my ears and then pass through the experience until the noise stops. But other than that, I think other sounds, or they do trigger, like if they are in the higher frequency realm, like nails against a chalkboard. I can't stand that, but it's it's not just because of like the sound to taste, it's just the sound, the frequency, and like the texture of that sound is just not pleasant for me. But again, that's also interesting to learn how that doesn't rub people in that same way. I've met people who don't get as bothered by the sound of nails against chalkboard, but it really disturbs me quite a lot.
How often do you start hearing uh, tuneful patterns in random noise subconsciously? I mean, without just listening closer to something, but just like going on the ground and hearing some voices in the white noise of the train or whatever. How often does it happen to you? Does it happen to you?
Oh yeah, melodies. I mean, I hear melodies all the time. But I wouldn't really necessarily link that to my synesthesia. Yeah, I don't think that my sound to taste really impacts the way I write melodies necessarily. But I am very sensitive to sound. So when I'm walking around or being sat somewhere where there's interesting sounds, like whether it's church bells or birds chirping or the sound of the underground, it is fun when I hear like rhythmic patterns or something. And I do tend to take my recorder out and like capture some sounds that I end up incorporating into my music in different parts. So yeah, that's that's a fun thing to have. I think one of my favorite things to experience when they just happen so unpredictably is when I'm listening to a song and it's the volume is low enough that I can hear the outside world, and there's something that happens that gels like perfectly with what I'm listening to. It's like a live remix situation, and I don't have a way to capture that specific moment. I've had that happen so many times, especially living in London, when there's like buskers in the underground. And sometimes I would travel and I'll have like a song that I'm vibing to, and there's like a sax player who's playing in the perfect key to what I'm listening to, in the right tempo and everything. And it's like one of these magical moments. I always wish that there was a way to capture, like record that specific moment of the song that I'm listening to and my external world at the same time. That would be a really cool tool if we could have that.
Yeah, great. Yes. And when you perform, when you compose, and when you listen to other people's music, does it feel differently synesthetically? I mean, when you're active and when you're passively enjoying something, and when you're composing, I mean, creating some, melodies or something, does it feel differently synesthetically?
Um, I think when I'm composing, so once I learned deeper, like the more intricate ways that my brain processes sound to taste and taste sound. It's particularly the high frequencies. I've learned to not have any kinds of fruit while I'm composing and mixing, because sometimes that will heighten the high frequencies that I'm composing. It'll like magnify it, and so it'll actually make my ears more sensitive to the high frequencies, and I tend to mix them a little bit too dull in my production. So yeah, it's when I am composing, I tend to try my best to have like a neutral palette so that I can also have like a neutral way of mixing my music. There was a period of time when I used to drink lemon water all the time, and there were some productions where they kept sounding like there was something missing because I started to like cut all the high frequencies out because they were like too sharp in my ears. And then I realized, oh, because I was maybe drinking lemon water. So I started doing experiments with myself and learned that if I don't have any fruit or citric fruit while I'm composing, then I'll have a much more like neutral way of composing and producing.
And performing and listening, how do they feel experientially different from composing?
I think composing, I'm probably way more sensitive to the synesthetic dynamic. Um, when I'm performing, it is really different, I guess, because I have my in-ear monitors, so I'm really isolated. I don't really hear the other sonic influences. And I'm really concentrated on my vocal delivery and also the live mixing of the music. Um, and especially if it's stuff that I've been performing for a while, then it's not like a new experience when I perform it. There's like improv that happens, but I'm familiar with the instrumentation and I'm familiar with what kind of sounds I'm using. So I don't really have these like strange experiences on stage where I'm suddenly having like an out of body experience where it takes me out of like performing, because I guess I kind of go into a meditative zone where I need to like shut everything out and just focus on the sounds and try to like actually zone out the other senses. And so before I had in-ears, it used to be more difficult because my ears would just take in way too much sonic information from the audience and also what I was trying to do on stage. So having like these in-ear monitors that are really amazing have helped to like also with my synesthesia to just like isolate that experience on stage so it's not too distracting for me.
And does it enhance appreciation of other performers and musicians' music?
Sorry, what was
I
the
mean,
question?
your synesthesia, does it enhance your appreciation or somehow mingles with your appreciation of other performers and musicians' music?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've always had a love for art and music. I think just my understanding of like how my synesthesia works, like when I understood and like started speaking to other synesthetes, and just learning about what synesthesia was and speaking with neurologists has given me a deeper understanding. And through that deeper understanding of how my inner workings behave, I guess has actually helped me to like maybe be more empathic towards others as well, just to understand that like internally we are so much more unique than we think we are. Just like the micro differences of how we perceive the world. And so just having that like really intricate understanding has made me become more curious of like other people's ways of processing and perceiving the world. And so yeah, maybe when I do listen to other people performing on stage or digesting other people's artistic works, I have a deeper curiosity of like not just what they are expressing artistically, but I'm curious about what are their inner workings or what were their inner workings during that time when they were creating their piece of work.
And your synesthetic reaction, are these reactions, are they stronger when you hear music or when people sing and you sing? I mean, a cappella in music sounds, which produce stronger synesthesia in you?
It's always it's more frequency based, so like the high and low frequencies, like I mentioned before. And that's both in performance and recorded music. With voices, I've always had a very peculiar relationship with voices because they always have the most like emotional trigger for me. And so when I speak with people, I oftentimes forget names and faces, but I tend to remember the sound of voices very easily. And so yeah, people's voices also have like some flavor information attached to them, but most human voices are in like the mid frequencies. So the flavor relationship, the flavor sound relationship is like way more subtle in the background. But there's some voices that have like higher frequencies that create like a stronger imprint in my memory. And so this actually happened um 2 years ago. I was at the airport and there was someone who was stood just like two people behind me, and I was with a group of people and one of them knew this person, and I could hear the voice and the voice sounded really familiar. And when he came to join our group, I didn't recognize the face, but it took me like I closed my eyes and I kept listening to the voice, and then his name immediately came to mind. But that didn't happen because I remembered his face. It was like a purely voice to flavor memory. Like I remembered there were notes of cherry in there. um and that's how, yeah, that's how he came up in my memory bank. So yeah, I think that's it's really interesting how we process information and how we hold information based on our like sensory capture of these memories.
Yes, yeah, I agree, absolutely. What's to me, what's even more interesting is this. Music, if you think of it, is a kind of technology. So, I mean, in the broadest sense, this is technology of how to produce sounds in a very special way. And this technology uh, makes you, as a synesthete, experience synesthesia. I mean, it's a very isolation, in an isolation. So nothing else but music. Why music is special, you think?
Why is music special? Um, I guess for me, it's always been the medium that I use to communicate things that I can't through words or images. And sometimes it feels very similar to sculpting, where I have to sculpt sounds to help communicate the complexity of emotions that maybe don't have concrete words, or maybe they're a combination of different feelings. And yeah, because I don't think that I ever feel just one emotion at a time. Most of the times I'm feeling a combination of emotions, either like happy and sad, happy about something and sad about something else, or feeling conflicted about a decision that I have to make, or yeah, missing someone at the same time, being angry at another person, you know. Being human's very complicated. Um, and so music has been the space that allows me to be cathartic with these strange and peculiar feelings, the complex like internal happenings, um and to be able to translate that into sound is a it's an intricate journey as well, because oftentimes, and I don't know, maybe it is because of my synesthesia, but a lot of the times the way I approach music and sound design comes from this place where I have a need to translate something, but there are no words and images that match what's happening internally. And maybe it is because of the synesthesia, I don't know. But I do oftentimes feel really overwhelmed with a lot of um, sonic information. So um, yeah, maybe, I mean, I would love to like find a way to test that, you know. um but it does, I guess the way I compose while I was learning more about synesthesia has made my way of translating my human experiences into sounds in a more intricate way. Um, and so it's also a little bit hard to really pinpoint how my understanding of my synesthesia has impacted my compositions, because it was all kind of happening around the same time where I was getting deeper into technological research, like my work with AI and machine learning, and just becoming more technological as an artist. And so like all these factors happening all at the same time makes it a little bit challenging to figure out like, okay, it's definitely synesthesia that's made my music compositions more intricate, or like my sound design stranger or weirder. I don't know, you know. Because there's just too many influences that have entered my human makeup to like contribute to the overall music that I've been making.
You know what? Still on the same topic of technology, I've noticed by listening and watching your videos and listening to your music, I've noticed that your music, you're trying to make it groovy and tangible and textured. In yes, and it's obviously sometimes video is focusing on your fingers, how you touch textures. So obviously there is something about this tactile experience as well about your music. And further on, I mean, the same question. What kind of qualities, including those that I've described, could be impossible without modern day technology for you in terms of synesthesia? I mean, what technology gives you to elicit your technology, your synesthesia more and more?
Huh. Um, I haven't tried using technology in new ways to translate synesthesia, but one of the installations that I've done that people had a really great time because it was very tactile was this flower wall poster. And it was this huge poster created by this company called Navalia. And there were like trees and flowers and flamingos. And I decided to translate the flavor of these flower shaped cookies, and also the flavor of hibiscus tea. So when they touched anything that looked like plant leaves and trees on the poster, they would hear my translation of the tea. And so they were able to like take a sip and like touch this poster and hear the frequencies, take a bite of the cookie and touch like the flower shaped cookies and hear the frequencies. And because people were able to have this very like tactile experience, they were able to like connect and actually be even more curious about their own sensory reactions that maybe they wouldn't have been curious about if they hadn't experienced it. So yeah, I think also the way I have created the sound tasting experiences, like the dining experiences in the past, um, have been really great to be able to use different interfaces that I've been using over the years to help like, do live compositions and stuff. Um, and so I think those two are my personal favorite experiences, just to be able to create installations and like this dining experience where I got to witness people have this very like visceral and immediate reaction, in a way that made them instantly curious, and suddenly they were like, oh, actually I think this sounds more like this. But they were never curious about what their flavors might sound like, or what flavors might sound like to them in relation to sound, without having had that experience. So yeah, that was the first time that I got to collaborate with a technology company to create installations that helped translate my synesthesia. I also did an interactive installation for Dr. Joel Salinas, who's also part of the synesthesia community. And that was really fun to just learn about all the different kinds of synesthesia he experiences and how he sees colors and numbers, and how he translates sounds from images that I was sending him. And so that was really fun. That was also a very like tactile experience where people had a poster that they were able to hold in their hands and look at images. And I created the images that helped translate like the initial image that I sent to Dr. Joel Salinas to then tell me what numbers he saw and what sounds he heard. And then when he touched each image, the people got to see a projection, an animated projection of that visual, plus the sounds that Dr. Joel Salinas heard. So yeah, I it's not a kind of collaboration that I do on a regular basis, but when there is a possibility to do things like that, it's always really fun. I think I really love the educational aspect too. And just, you know, witnessing people go through that journey of like trying something they've never tried before. And for me, creating installations, I try my best to think about how to give people an experience that's the easiest to access and feel, that doesn't require so much thinking. And from that experience, if I can give them something that is new and that's easy to feel, and then the questioning happens afterwards, then I feel like I've done my job of okay, so now you can understand what's happening here, there, and that. But as long as that first instance of like, if people can touch and hear something, and then from that dive a little deeper into the meaning behind it, then they can come up with their own new curiosities or their own translations of this new understanding of what this thing is about. I think that's
A-
yeah, that's
And in what way do you think modern day technologies and artificial intelligence help us or can help us understand synesthesia better? Can we go beyond the algorithms of synesthesia? Can we produce new types of synesthesia? Or can we somehow explore synesthesia more through these new technologies and applications?
yeah. I think that there are ways that we could definitely explore using AI to track perhaps like brainwave activity reactions to different things, like biofeedback, to capture information. This is something that I've always wanted to try as well. Like if we could capture people's biofeedback reactions to like flavors and sounds just as an experience, and then share the outcome of that experience to everyone. And let's say you were able to do that to like every single person that experiences this synesthetic experience, whatever it is, installation or dining experience or whatever it is, then I think that could be really interesting to maybe have this new way of capturing data and to analyze the data of like, are there any commonalities? Do other people have similar triggering happen because of this like new experience they've had? So I think like that could be an interesting way for synesthetes to maybe analyze our own reactions, and how this cross firing happens. And then the second step of being able to capture that maybe similar reactions that other people might have, or just like by simply giving them what we experience, and have like a much more intricate way of understanding, like, do other people feel that too? And are they having like interesting reactions that are abnormal, out of the ordinary, or yeah, I think there are definitely ways that we could explore that area. I mean, I guess like we've had like biofeedback stuff already, and like from artists who use it for like installations, whether it's like translating plants,
Yes.
responding to sounds, or so there are definitely ways that AI could be used to do data capturing and data analysis. And yeah, I think that would be really cool to create more works like this.